Let's jump into Google Forms. Google Forms offer a great way for you to collect data from students, staff, and even community members, parents, and such. Let's take a look at how we get to Google Forms first. There are a couple ways to do that. We can just simply come over here to the grid, which we call the waffle, click on that, and then we're looking for Google Forms. Now notice that My Google Forms is in the second section of this drop down here. One of the things I don't think I've shown yet that I think is important to show is that we can actually rearrange. So if I want to move this up to a different level, I can just simply click and drop that into here. So just a nice thing to do to rearrange pieces here on your grid. We can also get to Google Forms by coming up to New, dropping down to More, and then notice that Google Forms offers two things. If you click right here, it's just going to open a new form. If we come over here to the little arrow, it's going to actually offer you a blank form, which is new, or we can go to a template. The last way to do that is just to type in forms, forms.google.com, and that's going to get you into your template here. And again, we can go to blank, or you notice that we have some templates here that we can play with here in order to get the right form that we need. I'm going to start by just clicking on a blank form here, and that's going to go ahead and launch Google Forms. Notice there are a couple of different sections to this particular form window here. I've got my title over here that I can simply click on, and Jeff's, I better capitalize that, form. I also have some icons over here. That's where I can get to my add-ons. I can change the color, preview, as well as my settings menu. I've also got my show more buttons here that allow me to do some different things. Down in this area, this is where I actually create the form. You notice that once I click onto here, it's going to actually take and it's going to copy my name from here up into this description of the form. So that's just kind of the simple layout. Let's jump into creating questions here for this form. Let's start by capturing some information here on this form. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to ask for someone's name. So I'm just going to type in name, and then I'm going to click on here. Notice what it did. It actually said, hey, are you sure, or because you're using name, we're going to create a short answer text here. So if you noticed, it was actually set to multiple choice, but when I typed in name, it actually gave me the, or it actually just anticipated this is what I wanted and changed it to short answer. I can certainly come over here and change it to one of these other question types if I need to. Now, when you create a question, the first thing you want to do is, number one, make sure you have the right question type here. Number two, you have to decide whether or not you're going to make your question required. So if you are, we can simply just toggle this switch right here. Now we've all taken those surveys where it requires you to give a response. That's what you're doing by turning on the required button here. If you don't turn it on, somebody can fill out your form without putting in their name. And if that's what you're using to identify the person filling out the form, then you definitely want to make it required. The other thing we can do is we can click on the show more buttons right here, and we can add a description. So I'm just going to add a description because I want them to put in first name, first and last name. There we go. And so that they're going to see when they start to fill out the form. So that's a simple, easy way to answer a question here on the form. Again, it's a short answer over here. Now the question becomes, how do I answer another, or actually insert another question here? So I'm going to come over here to this little bar right here. You notice I have 4 or 5 things that I can add to this form. So I'm going to add another question here. And I'm just going to go ahead and click on that plus sign. Defaults to multiple choice again. And I'm going to type in email. And once I type in email, it actually remembers that as a short answer text piece as well. It gives me a suggestion here, enable email collecting setting. We will get to that in just a little bit. Now again, what I want to do is go ahead and add a description. Please add your address. Now the other thing that I can do on here is that because it's an email address and because I want to use that email address later, I want to make sure they get it right. So I want to show you how you can do something called response validation. Notice down here where under the 3 dots, I not only have description, but I also have response validation. When I click on that, what it will allow me to do is select from a drop down here, and because an email is a text-based answer, I'm going to go ahead and select text here. But notice there's some other ones I can actually validate on a number or the length or an expression. So I'm going to click on text. It contains, and notice that one of the choices is an email. I click on that, and then I can put down, sorry, this doesn't look, or this isn't an email address. So now anytime that they put in an email address that's not a full address, they're going to get a response that says, hey, I'm sorry, this doesn't work. This isn't an email address. So what they're looking for is name at and something.com.edu and so on. I also want to make sure I require this question because I'm going to collect these two, the name and the email. I'm going to use those later as a way of sending information out to the individuals that have filled out this form. Let's add another question here. So we have 2 short answer questions. We're going to answer a different type of question, or ask a different type of question now. I'm going to click on the plus sign up here, and now this time we're going to say, what location is your preferred vacation spot? How about that? Oops, I better spell that right. And notice it gives me that little underlined there, and tell me I spelled it wrong. Click there. Now, this is a short answer. See how it switched to short answer, but I'm going to go ahead and force it to go back to multiple choice. And I'm going to add some of these. So we're going to click Montana. We're going to select Wyoming. We're going to select Alaska. And the last one is, how about this? Anywhere with a beach. All right, so basically what we've done is we've added a multiple choice question. I'm going to show you something else we can do here. We can actually add other. So if I add an other, what that does is it gives that response, the person who's submitting the response, a chance to put in their own preferred location. So you can include that or not. If you make a mistake, you simply hover over that. You can come over here and you can click on these little X's and get rid of any one of these responses. Again, I'm going to make this required because I want everybody to fill this form out and answer all of the questions. So I come into here, I'm going to add another question. Let's just keep adding some questions using some different types of questions. And this time is, what is your favorite color? All right, how about that? And we're just going to make these easy questions. And it defaults to short answer, but this time what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a drop down. So a drop down, what that allows you to do is ask a question with several different answers, and I'm going to go ahead and put in my responses. I've got blue, yellow, green, red, purple, pink, black, orange, and so on. So I've got all of these in here now. Now, when you do a drop down, basically what it does is it gives you the option to only select one of these. So remember that it's same as multiple choice. We can only select one of these response or one of these answers. That's the same effect here for the drop down. We can only select one of these 8 different colors. I'm going to go ahead and click on required. I'm going to add one more question here, and I'm going to ask the same thing. And I'm going to show you something actually before I do that. Now, I don't want this question. Let's just say I don't want this question. I'm going to go ahead and click on delete, and that's going to get rid of that question. Now, I'm going to ask the same question up here. I'm just going to use a different question type. So instead of having to retype all of these, I'm simply going to come down to here to the duplicate question, click on it, and what you'll notice is it did the same thing. What is your favorite color? So I've got all the same colors in here that I've chosen. Instead of a drop down now, I'm going to actually do a checkbox. So there you go. So now, and I'm going to add other here just to show you how we can do that. The difference between a drop down and a checkbox is that this allows me to select more than one. However, the drop down and the multiple choice will only allow me to select one. So there are some subtle differences between these different question types here. Now there are many other question types. For example, you can do file uploads. We can actually do paragraphs. So if you have kids writing essays, you can do those. These get a little more complicated, but think of a Likert scale or a linear scale to use this. Multiple choice grid, checkbox grid. So this only allows one selection per column. This allows multiple selections per column. We can even actually schedule dates and times for appointments here in Google Forms. So those are the questions. There is a document within the course that talks about each of the different question types. It defines them a little bit more and gives you a little bit more information on this. But I would suggest or recommend that you go ahead and add some different question types to your form. Let's take a look at how we can take and send this off, or what our settings are for this before you do send it off. So I'm going to click on settings here. And when I click on that, a new panel comes up, and I've got 3 different headings up here. So the first thing that I can do is I can say collect all email addresses. So if I do this, what you need to know is that they have to be logged in. So if I'm sending this to my kids in my classroom and I want them to all be logged in, I might check that. But if I'm sending this out to parents in the community or parents of my students, then I may not want to check that because some of them may not have Google accounts, and I'm also collecting those in my form. I can restrict this to beyond the chalk users. So this is the domain that I'm in. So I can say this is only can be used by beyond the chalk users. An example of this, let's say we're working in a high school, it's homecoming, and I want everybody to vote for homecoming royalty. So what I would do is I would restrict the beyond the chalk users, so only people inside of our domain, inside our school, and they're going to check that by having those individuals be logged in, so they have to be logged in. Second thing I'm going to do with this particular example is limit it to 1 response, because I don't want somebody going in and voting 100 times for the same people. So because it requires them to sign in, I can limit them to 1 response, because it's going to ask them who you are. It's going to validate that against everybody that's already submitted a form. If they have already submitted, it's going to say, sorry, you've already done that. I can allow them to edit after submit or see summary charts and text responses. Again, this all depends on what you want them to be able to see. Most of the time, we don't want them to edit after submit, but there might be instances where you see that you might need to use that. So that's the first tab here on the settings menu. Presentation, I can show a progress bar. I can also shuffle questioned orders. So for example, if I'm giving this as a test, I've created a quiz, and I'm giving this to my 7th grade science class, and I have 3 sections of 7th grade science. Well, I have to be careful about kids going out and saying, hey, you know, it's A, B, A, C, A. If I click on shuffle question order, what it does is it changes the order of those questions. So my students are going to have to read through those. It doesn't change anything on the form for you as the teacher when you go back and you look at the responses, but it does change those for these students. And then I can change my response right here. So right now it's saying your response has been recorded. I can actually put a custom message in here. I can even put a website or a link in here as well. Now that you finish the form, please, or the survey, please go to this link and start reading this passage here or whatever. So that's the second tab here on the settings. The third tab is quizzes. This is where it gets really powerful. So we can make this a quiz. And so what you need to know is that some of your questions that you ask are going to be very easily gradable if you make it into a quiz, and some are not. We're going to spend a little bit more time on creating a quiz in a little bit later video on this, but just know that this is where you're going to get in to make a quiz. And you notice I have some different options here that I can take and check and uncheck if I need to. Once I'm done setting these up, I'm going to turn that off because I don't want this to be a quiz. This is just a survey. I'm going to hit save, and that's going to save all of the settings there. Now the last part here is to send this off. If I click on send, I can do this lots of different ways. I can actually send this to an email address if I want. I can create a link. I can even shorten that. So you notice this is really long here. So if I'm just going to copy and paste that to an email, that might be easy. But if I want to send it off another way to make it a little easier to type into a URL bar, I can do it this way. I can also do it like this, where I can take and create an iframe. This is an embeddable HTML. So let's just say I've got a survey and I want to embed it into my web page. I would take and copy this iframe source right here and then copy it into a Google site or a WordPress site or something like that. It will embed very easily into that. So that is the essence of Google Form. One other button that I should probably show you, if you really want to know what your form is going to look like before you send it off, we can simply click on preview, and that's going to give you the ability to preview what those questions look like. Again, notice that I'm getting these different pieces here. All right. Now, one of the things that you might notice here is that things got shuffled around. That's because I have that shuffle questions on. Now, I don't really want that, so I'm going to come back in here, and that's why it's a good idea to preview it. I'm going to come back in here to settings, and under general, and so we've got everything else. I'm not going to restrict this again. I'm not going to limit it to one response. I'm going to now go to presentation. I'm going to turn off the shuffle question order. I'm going to click on save one more time, come back to preview, and now you notice that this is how I want my form to look in this particular instance. Again, see the difference between the different types of questions. I have a short answer. I have a multiple choice. Here's your drop-down list. Again, allows me to select just one. This is your checkbox, which allows me to select as many as I want. So that's Google Forms in a nutshell. We're going to take a look at some more advanced features in the next episode.